thinking about trying Noom, perhaps you're wondering if it's any good. This is my honest review as a registered psychologist and a food freedom coach. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what's good and not so good about Noom. Definitely watch this before trying it out. Trigger warning here. Because Noom is a diet, I am going to be discussing things like weight loss and calories. So if you think that kind of thing might be triggering for you, I definitely recommend watching another of my videos. I'm Lara, the food freedom psychologist, and I can help you create a healthy and happy relationship with food without guilt or stress eating. I hope you're enjoying my videos and getting so much value from them. If you are, be sure to click the like button, subscribe to this channel, and hit this bell to be notified every time I post a new video. In my signature program, so many of the clients I've worked with have spent a lot of time dieting. Sadly, for a lot of them, this has ended up with a very negative relationship with food. But through my coaching, we've seen so many incredible transformations with people completely changing their relationship with food and their body image. So before we dive in, I have a question for you. Have you done Noom? Maybe you've thought about trying it. Let me know in the comments below. So what is Noom then? At its very heart, Noom is a weight loss program. It was supposedly designed by behavioral psychologists, nutritionists and personal trainers, and the idea behind it is to help someone lose weight over the long term through implementing sustainable health habits. The advertising for Noom says things like, retrain your brain, stop dieting, get lifelong results, lose weight for good. Spoiler alert here, a lot of this is marketing BS, so please keep watching to get my honest review of Noom. So how does Noom work then? For the purposes of this video, I actually signed up to Noom because I wanted to see what it would be like if I was trying it for real. So when you click on the Noom link, you're taken straight to a quiz, and in this you're asked for things like how much weight you want to lose, a little bit of your demographic information, you're asked for your height and weight. I actually don't know what my weight is, so I actually guessed for this. And then you're asked for your goal weight. I said that I wanted to lose a few kilos, and purposely I put down a weight that would have me at 18.5 BMI, body mass index, which is officially the cusp between underweight and normal. I was curious to see if this would be flagged as like inappropriate weight loss or something. It wasn't. I said that I was losing weight for a wedding, and I put a date in the future that was 2 months from the date that I signed up. Then you're asked a few health questions. So it asks you, I guess, normal things that you would expect, like, do I suffer from high blood pressure? Do I have depression, diabetes? And then a really important question, I think, it asks, do you have an active diagnosis of an eating disorder, e.g. bulimia, anorexia or similar? Obviously I said no because I don't, but this is a bit of a red flag for me because I think that they should also ask if you've ever been diagnosed with an eating disorder, because, well, I'll talk about that a bit later. Then you asked a few questions around mindful eating, what your current eating habits are. Then I get a calculation of my weight loss pace, and that's when they ask for your email address, and then you're shown this graph and it shows how much weight you're predicted to lose. So based on today's weight, obviously I put in a fictitious amount, so I'm not sure how much I weigh, today's weight and how much that I may lose over this period of time. And actually at this point it's telling me that I'm not going to be able to lose the amount of weight that I want by this fictitious wedding that I have 2 months from today. Okay, so now there's some more questions. So you get 10 questions that they say are about creating a behavior profile. It asks some questions about previous weight loss attempts. Then I actually get another graph saying that based on my answers to the behavior profile, I could actually lose the weight a little bit faster. And at this stage, I've probably spent about 10 minutes completing the quiz. It's quite a long time, I think. And then I'm told by Noom, the good news is Noom is not a one diet fits all plan. Noom is about you and your goals. I'm not sure about this, because honestly, I do think Noom is one size fits all, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. And now we get onto the stage where these motivational quotes and extract. Then I get another graph showing me that my predictive weight loss is going to be sooner than the last recommendation. And now at this stage, I'm told that I will be able to lose the weight in time for the wedding. And then I get some screenshots about why Noom is different. They're going to be there every step of the way. Then some more questions about my activity levels and nutrition. I mean, all of these kinds of questions I actually think are really important. And then I get a screenshot on yo-yo dieting, which I think is a little bit ironic considering Noom is restrictive and may actually trigger yo-yo dieting, but I'll talk about that a bit more later. And then more questions. And at this stage, my motivation is starting to flag a little bit, and I feel like it's taken me actually a really long time to complete this. I've got to do a quiz around what's more healthy, a grape or a raisin. That's a massive red flag for me. Then there's a question about mindful eating, which actually I think is a great thing. Then I'm asked questions about what's the optimal time of day to weigh myself. Again, I feel like this is a bit of a trigger for people who have recovered from eating disorders or may be prone to eating disorders. I actually stopped weighing myself years ago because of my eating disorder, because it was hugely triggering for me. So that's why I don't know how much I actually weigh. Then there's some information about how to stay full on less calories, which I don't know about that, bit of a red flag. Then they tell you about labeling. So they tell you that they label their foods green, yellow and orange. And note that if you've done Noom in the past, they used to label that category as red, but they've now changed that to orange. But then they say that there are no bad foods. The philosophy that they have is to eat more low calorie foods. Okay, it's like red flags here. At this stage, it's taken about 20 minutes. And I do wonder if I was doing this for real and not for the purposes of this video, maybe I would have given up by now. I don't know. So now I've got to the stage where they've created this personalized plan for me to lose some kilos before this fictitious wedding. And finally, they told me that I'll be able to lose this amount of kilos 2 weeks before the wedding. Trigger warning here because I'm talking about numbers, but they've basically told me that I can lose 4 kilos in 6 weeks. I don't know how I feel about that. And now this is when you get to the pay screen. So at this point, after you've completed all the questions, you've already given them your email address, so I know that I'll get an email from them. But this is the point where you can pay. And they give you various options, so you can do a trial. So I am signing up for a trial. For an app, it's £1 to trial it for 2 weeks, and then they're very clear that after those 2 weeks you'll go on to pay the full amount. There's a lot of pressure to sign up. So when I put in that I want to pay for £1, they actually just say, are you sure you don't want to pay the full amount for the trial, or do you not just want to go ahead and pay the full amount and just start straight away? I also get offered an exercise plan and a meal plan as well, pay extra for those. Obviously I've said no to that, there's more pressure to buy. Finally I am in. So I'm in Noom now. So this is where you find out what your calorie allowance is on a daily basis, and I've been given a calorie allowance of 1,320 calories, and I'm allowed to go up to 1,400 to enable me to lose the weight. And then in the app itself, there's several courses that I can complete. There's lots of educational content, which again, some of the titles I'm not so happy with as a food freedom coach, the psychology of weight loss, but they've got stuff on things like mindful eating. So, you know, there's some positive elements to it. And if I was doing this properly, I'd have to track things. So I'd have a progress report. I also know that I get a virtual coach. So that's it. So that's what happens when you sign up to Noom. So now I'd like to actually review Noom and tell you my honest opinion. I'm starting with what I see as some red flags, and obviously I've given you an indication as to some of the red flags as I saw them as I was signing up. One of the tensions I see is that Noom does a lot of advertising telling you that it's not a diet, but it's a diet. It really is. So my first issue with it is that the calorie allowance is just far too low. At my height, I'm quite tall, and weight, I am being told that my calorie allowance is 1,320 a day. And these are the calorie needs of a toddler, not a grown woman. So this is my first huge red flag. It's not sustainable as well. Noom says over and over that it's about long-term sustainable weight loss, but you cannot continue only eating 1,300 calories or 1,320 calories a a day forever. It's really disordered. In the past, I have followed a 1200 calorie a day diet, and I remember well being constantly hungry, like I wasn't satisfied. So I can imagine that if I was to follow Noom, I probably would feel hunger a lot. And for me personally, it's resulted in a lot of binges. Now, interestingly, my experience is supported by research conducted after World War II in order to see the impact of semi-starvation on men. And yes, the study was only conducted on men. And in the 6-month semi-starvation phase, they were feeding the men 1,560 calories a day. So obviously note that that's less than I'm being recommended, and it's being called semi-starvation in this study. And the outcomes of this semi-starvation phase on the men was really negative. So they had emotional issues, they felt depressed, they had thoughts constantly about food, there were bouts of bulimia, there was social isolation. And this is what happens when people go on a diet. It's often not a very positive experience, aside from potentially the euphoria that you feel when you initially lose weight. And I link to that piece of research below if you're interested. And I think it's interesting that that was considered then semi-starvation, yet you have something like Noom that's talking about, oh, this is about long-term sustainable weight loss, but actually it's semi-starvation. So another issue I see is the logging and tracking that's required. And yes, I totally get that some people like to log and track, and that's great. If it works for you, that's cool. You have to log everything you eat so that you can work out your calories to make sure that you're eating within your daily allowance. And I have lots of issues with this. First of all, I think it's time consuming and tedious. Secondly, I think it gives a quite negative relationship with food because you're just looking at food as a way to fuel you or to give you calories. You forget about the other things that are enjoyable about food, the joy of eating. I also have some general issues with counting calories because counting calories isn't particularly accurate anyway. When you look at the nutrition information on food and you look at the calories, by law they're allowed a 20% leeway either direction, which means you may be overdoing your calories or underdoing your calories on a daily basis. I think also calorie counting often ignores your own internal hunger and fullness signals because you're so focused on making sure that you eat 1,320 calories a day. Our calorie needs fluctuate across a day and a month, and it depends on how active you are. I don't think that Noom really took into account my level of activity. Like if I was really active, I should have more calories. Anyway, I actually talk about some of the issues with calorie counting in this video here, so you can take a look at it there. And then tracking. So you're asked to weigh yourself regularly. They recommend weighing yourself every day in the morning. But I also think this isn't necessarily helpful. I mean, psychologically, there are some issues when you step on the scale. One of two things can happen. You may have lost weight in which you feel fabulous and really excited, but that might trigger a binge because you're like, woohoo, I lost some weight so I can go out and eat whatever I want. Or you step on the scales and you haven't lost weight, or maybe you've even put on weight and then you feel really bad about yourself. And the thing is with our weight, it fluctuates across the course of a month, it can fluctuate across the course of the day, there's water retention and so on. And in any case, lean muscle weighs more than fat. So sometimes a better thing for you to do may be to gain weight rather than lose weight. So I think this tracking of your weight may not be necessarily the best thing for you. And it may be that there are better goals to have. So what about improving your fitness or being able to walk to the tube without feeling out of breath? Or what about starting some new activity like roller skating? Or what about feeling more confident in clothes? I think there are a lot better outcomes that aren't just about weight loss. Scales are very one-dimensional. The next thing I see is that Noom categorizes food as green, yellow, and orange. And like I said, Noom actually recently changed from red to orange. And I think it's very problematic that some very nutrient-dense, health-promoting foods are in that orange category. And they make a really big deal that no food is off limits, and that's great. But what I can see from this traffic light system is that food is demonized, however subtly. So I'm quickly going to show you the list. So this is the list that I was given. So this is the green list, and you're encouraged to eat as much food as possible within your calorie allowance from the green list. And this is the yellow list, and then this is the orange list. So this is the list that you're meant to eat from much less than everything else. I think my issue is I see on this orange list things like like nuts, pumpkin seeds, flax seeds, minced beef, rice cakes, avocado. These are all on the orange list. If you think about a traffic light system, green means go and red means stop. And yes, I know they've changed, but orange still means pause. And I think there's no denying that however you categorize your foods, whether you give them points, whether you say that some foods are free or whether it's a traffic light system, there is a hierarchy of foods there, and you are, however subtly, saying that some foods are better than others. Even if you say that no food is off limits, you're kind of subtly implying it through this traffic light system. So the fourth thing I see is it feels like quite a huge commitment. So even just completing the quiz, that took me quite a long time. And there's a lot of info in the app. And I'm sure that if you want to get a lot of educational info, that's great. And they give you some ideas about like when to consume the information. You've got to track and measure everything, which obviously it's a diet, so I kind of get it as well. But I think if it was me, I'd probably find this a bit too much of a commitment. Fifth thing I see is the focus is very much on weight loss and not on health. So despite the adverts and despite Noom's protestations that they are not a diet, they are a diet. The focus is much more on weight loss than it is on long-term health. And I really don't see how this is sustainable. It's not. So they talk about it's a like long-term sustainable weight loss, but it just doesn't seem like that. And yes, I know that there are some good positive elements. So in the quiz, they talked a lot about mindful eating and positive body image. But at the end of the day, the focus is on weight loss. And the research is absolutely clear on diet. And I would lump Noom in with other low-calorie diets. Basically, regardless of the kind of diet you do, in the first 6 months, you're likely to lose around 10% of your body weight. But if you look at the long-term data on diets, and that's all kinds of diets, within 2 to 5 years, people have put the weight back on in 80 to 95% of cases. And in 2/3 of cases, they end up heavier than they are. That's really poor long-term result. I go into a lot more detail about this in this video here. So I recommend taking a look at that if you want to know in more detail like what happens with restrictive diet. But really, if you did want to maintain this long-term weight loss, you'd have to continue eating very low calories in the long term. And I just don't think that's sustainable. It shouldn't be sustainable and it's disordered. And that leads me to my sixth point. I strongly believe that doing Noom can trigger an eating disorder. When I signed up to Noom, I was asked if I have an active eating disorder and I said no, but I was never asked whether I have recovered from an eating disorder or had an eating disorder in the past. I've actually had two, and I think it's highly problematic that people with previous eating disorders are trying Noom. And having said all that, in the app there is a resource that talks about eating disorders, and it does say in there that it doesn't recommend Noom for people who've had eating disorders. However, it still let me sign up and didn't ask that question. So I think anyone who has previously suffered from an eating disorder should not be allowed to join Noom. A lot of the behaviours that you're expected to follow doing Noom are behaviours that I had when I had an active eating disorder. So the very low calories, categorising food, not eating certain foods that were fattening or high sugar, and tracking and weighing myself. Those were all disordered behaviours for me with an eating disorder. And so if you had an eating disorder and you do Noom, and you're encouraged to do all that kind of stuff, I think it can be really triggering. And plus the research shows that dieting can be a precursor to eating disorders, so I'm pretty certain that Noom has triggered eating disorders in the past. But the question is, does Noom work? Well, I guess it depends on your definition of what you mean by work. If you define this as being, will you lose some weight in the 16 weeks that it recommends you lose weight over, then I would say, yeah, you probably will, much like most people who go on low-calorie restrictive diets. But do I think it leads to long-term and sustainable weight loss? The answer to that is categorically no. And I'm sure there will be people that have maintained weight loss doing Noom, but I've actually had a look at some of the research on whether Noom works, and I can't see any long-term studies or long-term data looking over a year, 2 years, 5 years. What I have seen is one piece of research that says that 78% of the people who use the app will lose weight over 9 months, but that's 3/4. That means that there's still a significant amount of people that don't lose weight. But I think there are huge limitations to this particular study I'm talking about, and I've linked it below. Number one, it's not a randomized control study, so there's no control group that they are comparing people to. maybe doing another diet. So we can't say that it's Noom necessarily, or whether it's just the low calories. And it's a short study. It's not looking at it in the long term. So I'd be really interested to follow that cohort of people over a period of time to see where they are in 2 years or 5 years. And can Noom really claim to be this sustainable weight loss program? I don't know that it can. So is there anything that's good about Noom? So I think the app is pretty good. It's very easy to navigate. I actually really liked some of the educational content. So some of it is written actually really well, and it has some information about motivation, habits, food, psychology. Yet I still can't help finding a lot of the material incredibly ironic. In the learning material, it talks about not labeling food, but Noom has a traffic light system, so it's subtly labeling food. But there are some positive things, like it recommends that for every 2 hours that you're sitting down, say in an office job, you should get up and move around for 10 minutes. That's great advice. It talks about adding food into your diet rather than subtracting it. It's actually something that I recommend on my program, so I agree with that. But then at the same time, it talks about trying to avoid temptation, so it goes and moralizes food. It gives some really good tips about planning your meals, but then again it says don't expose yourself to the tempting aisles, which again is moralizing the food. So I find the language really inconsistent. On the one hand, there is some really good advice, some of which I give to my clients, but on the other hand, it's laden with a lot of diet culture and a lot that frankly contradicts each other. So the bottom line is, Noom is a diet. It's a diet that encourages you to eat very low calories on a daily basis, to focus on eating the low calorie but nutrient dense food, and it encourages you to monitor your progress via this app. And although there is some positive stuff in the app, it mostly is focusing just on weight loss, not about improving your health in the long term. And for me, that's problematic. To summarize, I really don't recommend doing Noom, and that is as a registered psychologist and a food freedom coach. Quite the opposite. I recommend giving up diets altogether. And if you are ready to give up dieting and find something that is long-term and sustainable in the long run, how about joining Undiet online? It's an amazing community where you can watch workshops, do movement classes, listen to audios, meditations, and every single one of them takes a non-diet yet health promoting approach. You have access to all of this stuff from over 250 experts. There are fitness coaches, registered dietitians, psychologists, therapists, body image experts, and so much more. It's actually the largest non-diet space online. So think about if Mind Valley, Netflix, and a Facebook group had a baby, that kind of thing. There are details in the links below. As always, I've added some other resources and some links for you to explore. And today I recommend 2 books. So one is called Just Eat It, and the other is called Intuitive Eating. And they are 2 books that offer a fantastic way of thinking about food from a non-diet, non-restrictive perspective. So check out these videos next for more health, food freedom, and mindset tips. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and if you know anyone that's about to start Noom, send them this video. Bye for now.